Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the channel. I'm Brian Lusk, your host. Thank you for joining me today. Glad to have you here. We're going to get right into things today, and I just want to say, as soon as you get in, go ahead and chime in. Let me know you're here, and give me an idea if you have any questions or comments. Absolutely chime in. Love to hear from you. Let's start off with this convoy. That's kind of the big news that's been going around the last day and a half or so, and kind of see if we can suss a little bit of details out of this. This is a 2-minute long video. I don't remember if it's got music. I'll bet you it does. Give me a second here. Yeah, it does. Okay, so this video is long enough that I will probably just pop it up here at the full screen and let her rip for you here. No audio just because of the copyright potential on this one. Hey, Al, glad to have you here. It looks like you're better prepared than I am. You can see here that the lead truck was hit by a Ukrainian, possibly a HIMARS, but could also be a drone. With the lead vehicle of this convoy destroyed, the rest of the trucks became under fire and started scattering hither and yon. You can see them scatter throughout the area. Drones are now hunting them down, truck by truck in various places. You can see they tried to hide in the tree lines. This would not be significant, except for this happened on the Kursk side, the Russia side of the international border. That's right. Ukrainians found this convoy heading towards Ukraine, and they interdicted it and destroyed it, top, bottom, left, and right. Lead vehicle, tail vehicle, and then started destroying everything in the middle. And yeah, this is a typical song that they put on these things, so you don't want to hear that. So I'm going to tell you that for sure. But every bit of the equipment here that we can be able to tell, nearly all of it was destroyed. A variety of supplies and equipment that would have been valuable for the Russian invaders as they worked their way into the Kharkiv region. Now they don't have that option anymore, as these vehicles all went willy-nilly to try and escape the attacks here. Funny, the thing I noticed, though, is that they all drove to places and stopped, but very few of them actually got into cover of any kind. They didn't get into the trees. A couple of them did, but you follow the tracks and it leads right to the vehicle. So that's what most struck me about this, is that the Ukrainians systematically dismantled and destroyed this entire convoy right here. Al, I will address that in just a second here. Hey, Jerry, glad to have you here. Al, this is only 2.5 kilometers from the border with Ukraine, and it was using drones only. The formation was passing through Kursk, or the Sudza district of Kursk. 12 pieces of equipment taken out of this convoy. Just impressive work overall. Now, you mentioned that you're surprised they still have any trucks left. The truth is, if there's one thing Russia actually does have in spades, it's trucks. They have got thousands upon thousands upon thousands of trucks. And even if they ran out of military trucks, they can still get trucks from China. It's not even restricted equipment, which shocks me when I found that out, because I would think that trucks would be atop of the list of things that I would think that the Western powers would not want Russia to get their hands on. But they can just take civilian trucks, paint them green, and send them into the front. They've got a huge population, many of which have cars and trucks. Therefore, they're not going to run out of trucks anytime soon. They still have quite a few of these, thousands upon thousands of these trucks in their storage facilities. Note, however, these storage facilities are being drained. There was a whole thread I went through on that and found that and just was like, yeah, it's coming down. But yeah, overall, that's the type of situation. This is right outside of the Sumy Oblast, and just taking it out. This didn't even use Western weapons. Really, in the end, this used drones. And I better adjust the title here, because I just realized it was not accurate. Let me see. I'll just pull that off, because I don't like being inaccurate on this, and I prefer to get that fixed up. while I'm thinking about it. So save that and bloop. Okay, fixed. So anyway, yeah, this is the convoy. The Ukrainians just absolutely, totally just destroyed from front to back and successfully took it out before it ever reached Ukraine. And this is what makes the real difference here. If they can interdict and stop the equipment and the supplies before they ever arrive in Ukraine, it means that more of Ukraine stays intact, not destroyed. And I'll be talking about some of the other things they have been doing with Western weapons as we continue on. In the meantime, let's go ahead and jump in here to the news for Ukraine itself. Ukrainian field commanders are reportedly compensating for training difficulties that mobilization has exacerbated by training new personnel on the front line. Now, going through this is from the Institute for the Study of War. Going through this, what's really happening is that these soldiers who are mobilized get some basic training right off the bat, but before they're actually deployed by their commanders put them through training short of the field. They're not sending them right to the front. They're giving them training right off the front lines and helping them to understand what's to be expected and how things work, and moving them forward to the front line. This does not mean that there isn't some trainees that end up on the front lines even without this additional training. This appears to be an ad hoc action of the commanders in the field, not of the brass back in Kyiv, where they've made this decision to try and train their troops and get them better before they end up in the actual contact with the enemy. This decision, says it's for the Study of War, to train newly deployed personnel on the front before committing them to combat, indicates that the overall quality of Ukrainian forces will likely remain higher than that of Russian forces in the mid to near term. So that's kind of the overall situation on mobilization there. Al, they do still have some of that World War II Lend-Lease Studebakers and deuce and a halves. They've got all kinds of things. They brought out a genuine, honest to goodness T-54 tank, not just a T-55, but a genuine original T-54 that got destroyed on the battlefield. They've been bringing out Kamaz trucks like crazy. They've been bringing out those there was that truck I mentioned the other day a couple of videos ago, where they were like, we were so pleased to bring out this 1950 truck to give to our soldiers here. We were able to purchase it and send it to the front lines. And it's like, my heavens. Oh, my heavens. Crazy, crazy, crazy. From Ewan McDonald, sources in Ukrainian military say there are signs that Russia might be readying Tu-95 and Tu-22 strategic bombers for another strike on Ukraine tonight. This was as of about 4 hours ago, so if this strike is going to happen, it'll probably be happening right about now or within the next couple of hours. So this is the latest here. This man does report there's no light in his part of Kyiv with patchy internet, and they're working on repairing work and cell tower batteries running out. So this might not be, they might not get the alerts all that well. They're busting out the museum pieces over there for Russia. That doesn't mean they're not manufacturing new equipment. They've still got a T-90 production line. I think it's got a production rate of around 8-ish tanks per month, considering that Russia's losing somewhere around 116 tanks per month, if I remember right. I've got those numbers in today's videos too, because I know every once in a while, some people like to kind of chew on those numbers just a little bit. So always good fun, and we'll take a look at that when you get there, if I remember correctly. Moving on to the news out of Russia. Not a lot out of Ukraine itself right now. Most of that's in the front lines, which we will get later. An ammunition depot caught fire in the village of Grimchi in the Belgorod region yesterday, following an explosion in a Russian military camp. The Russians have claimed this was due to careless handling of ammunition, which led to a fire and injured 7 military personnel who were hospitalized. This is 39 kilometers north of Belgorod and over 63 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. At this point, we have no evidence that this is anything but the Russians being Russians. So they're destroying their own equipment just as well as the Ukrainians are. And I think that we can see where that's going. This is talking about Major General Ivan Popov here. This is from the Ministry of Defense of the UK, talking about his arrest. Now, they do talk about him being arrested on fraud and corruption charges related to the sale of military construction materials, and that he was dismissed from his post as commander of the 58th Combined Arms Army. But notably, this happened after he criticized the leadership in Moscow about the conduct of the war. So clearly, there was some, shall we say, there's always corruption amongst the leaders of the Russian army. The only time they prosecute that corruption is when somebody's become suddenly somebody they want to put away someplace for a while. Popov, unfortunately for the Russians, Popov is highly competent, though, and is very well respected by his troops. And in fact, there have been rumblings that some of his personnel might mutiny over this, but I'll believe it when I see it. This is really more of a morale destroyer for the Russians. These troops will be unmotivated by his arrest. A Russian propaganda operation was meant to present the pro-Kremlin oligarch Viktor Medvedchuk to the international public as a potential replacement for President Zelensky, according to the Washington Post. They did note that Medvedchuk had actually shown up in Belarus just recently. This is probably part of the whole Zelensky's now an illegitimate leader because his term has expired, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is an entire propaganda push, and they were hoping to present Medvedchuk as the real leader of the Ukrainians, which seems to have fallen flat on its face. We already know that Russia has been stealing Ukrainian grain out of the occupied territories and shipping it out in as clandestine a manner as possible. This, though, caught my eye. This is from Crimean Wind. They took a look at some of the grain carriages in Feodosia that were being brought to the port there, and it turns out those grain carriages also belong to a Ukrainian company by the name of Sagret Plus. So not only is the grain stolen, so are the rail cars that are transporting the grain to the ships to be hauled out and sold on the or given to the Kremlin's favored individuals. You've got to see this video. I think no audio. Okay. So yeah, no audio on this one. What you're seeing here is a train being filmed from the driver's cab as it rushes through a forest fire. This is in Buryatia. It's been burning for several days, covering 30,686 hectares, with 6 more fires discovered in the past 24 hours. So rather than keep their trains and their personnel and their passengers safe, they're basically jumping in there and hitting the gas full throttle and going through there as quick as they can, right through the heart of these forest fires. Crazy, crazy, crazy. Now, if you're over in Poland, you might have seen something coming from the Russian propagandists that might concern you. They are threatening the complete destruction of Poland, and the Poles are convinced that no one will risk the security of France and Britain and the United States for Poland. That's their thing. They're sitting there going, okay, look, will the U.S. really go to war with us over Ukraine? And so far, the answer is no. We're just providing equipment and weapons. But Poland's a NATO member, and they're suggesting that a NATO member could be attacked and captured, and nobody would be willing to come to their aid, not even NATO. I don't believe that's the case, although with some of the yahoos in charge of some of these things, you never know. Still, it's clear the Russians have more on their minds than just Ukraine. In that same way, Solovyev, another Russian propagandist, has threatened to wipe out German cities so that they look worse than Volchansk. Volchansk, the city that the Russians have been bombing and hitting with artillery shells and rolling into day after day after day in their Kharkiv offensive. I have good news about Volchansk later, but for now, just understand they're not coming to negotiate. The only negotiation they want is unconditional surrender. They're not going to be the ones doing it either. Let's talk about BMPs for a moment or two. The BMP loss rate continued to decline this month after hitting a high of 164 losses in March. It's now down to 116 BMPs for May. This is just the BMPs. Their BMP, in case you're not familiar, is an armored personnel carrier, kind of a weird flat sandwich with a little turret on top. Got hatches for letting the soldiers hop out. So it's not a full-on tank. It's an armored personnel carrier is what it is. The fact that it's falling off of this high could indicate that Russia is no longer committing quite so many of their armored vehicles to these assaults again. Don't think it's really indicating that they're using them on defense. I think it's more likely they're pulling them back from the front lines entirely. Maybe they're trying to work on concentrating them for something else. But usually when we start seeing this type of drop, at least from what I've seen so far, it means the Russians have been pulling what's left of their armored personnel carriers off the front lines so they can replenish and go for another round. In that same vein, 119 tanks were lost last month because this is numbers for May. This is still an extremely high loss rate. As I've mentioned before, I think they can manufacture between 8 and 10 of the T-90 tanks. I don't know of any other active production lines for Russian tanks. I do know they're still refurbishing T-72s, T-55s, T-54s, T-62s to send to the front lines. But even those stocks are starting to wear thin. So how much of what's left can actually be rebuilt and put back into the field is anybody's guess. I just know that these deep Soviet stockpiles have now managed to be utterly wasted in Ukraine. So comparing this 119 compared to May of last year, where Russia only lost 55 tanks, you can see the overall trends just kind of wandering around. That's the green line here. Huge spikes and drops. With the only kind of weird one is this 92 where it dropped while the BMPs went up at the same time. This could indicate that they just didn't have that many tanks available. This is not a sustainable loss rate for Russia. That simple. Yes, I know Russia is enormous. They've got a huge landmass, but they only have about triple the number of people. And they've got a whole lot more land they've got to tend, care for, and keep safe and secure than Ukraine does. It just so happens that Ukraine actually cares about their people instead. Briefly pausing to look at the comments. Lucille says, sure hopes that's not correct. If no one will help Poland, we are in bigger trouble than even I thought. I don't think it's correct. I think we got some screwballs in charge, but I think if Poland actually did get attacked, I think there'd be no question, but there would be a massive response. Even the Germans, the French, the British, they would all be throwing everything at it because it would say that there are no borders and no boundaries that Russia is not willing to cross. And Luciano says, no worries, 70% of the Article 5 is written in Polish. Cute. Okay, so anyway, back to the tanks for just a moment. That is a loss rate of 3.774 tanks per day. So, like I said, this is just not sustainable. Now, this is kind of hard to see because it's a little bit small, but I'll try and get it a little bit larger for you. This is a motorcycle with a cope gauge. Literally, they're taking their motorcycles with sidecars and welding up batches of chain link fence to counter drones attacking the motorcycle riders. The thing is that how's the motorcycle rider supposed to get to actually do anything? I mean, they've got a big gap here. How quick do you think he can get out of there if they've got a really big boom on one of those drones? Just saying. Not I would not be writing this into anything. Over in the Kharkiv region, however, the Russians do love to do this. They love to record themselves committing war crimes, including in this case the cruel treatment of Ukrainian soldiers that they have taken prisoners of war. This is, in fact, a war crime and a direct violation of the Geneva Convention. But do you expect anything less from the Russians? Now, this article, I'm gonna copy and paste the link right here into the chat. This is from the Kiev Post. The global alliance where Russia, the narco gangs in Mexico, and Islamic terrorists are all working together to get across the southern border and cause chaos in the United States. The article is excellent. I only have a limited ability of vetting this information, but the Kiev Post is usually really good on this. So I'm providing the link to you to read and come to your own conclusions. Like I said, my ability to vet this information is limited, but the source is generally accurate. So that's my thoughts on it. This is just one more, in my mind, one more proof that Russia's at war with the United States. And it doesn't matter how much we deny it. The proof is in the pudding. Yeah, they're arranging for these terrorists and these narco gangs to get into the United States. In fact, we've seen several attempted attacks, including the one at the at Fort Liberty, another one at Quantico, where foreigners showed up and either tried to ram their way through or tried to take pictures. And in one of those cases, the guy who did it ended up dead. Because, well, for one thing, he was standing on the lawn of a special operations guy. Over in Utka, Komi Republic, Russia, an explosion occurred at the Lukoil refinery. Now, there was no error alert or anything like that. This could be a mistake on their part. I mean, it's a possibility. It could also be sabotage, just pure accident. But either way, this is a significant explosion over at the Lukoil refinery. That's one more thing that's going to be a problem for Russia in trying to keep their fuel stocks going. More information on that. Another lubricants warehouse in Novosibirsk is burst into fire with a massive fire reported. No reports on how this one came up in flames either. So I'm sure that at some point in time, the Russians will say it was a error on their part. It's amazing how many of the errors on their part results in huge conflagrations like this. A construction materials warehouse burned down in Irkutsk with the roof collapsing. Once again, no drone, no anything. But I am immediately put to the hypermart situation in Kharkiv, where the Russians bombed basically the equivalent of a Home Depot. There could be some partisan activity involved here. Just saying. Wives of Russian soldiers brought their children, including those in strollers, if you pay attention here to the video, to the front of the Ministry of Defense HQ and said, "Are we going to be arrested for protesting here, even with our babies, because the police have just parked a paddy wagon right in front of us?" No word on if they were arrested or not. The best information I have seen so far is they were not. I think the police just didn't want to get involved with all the babies. There's some cuties in here. I mean, look at that little boy right there. We got a little, looks like probably a girl right there too. Now, this one, Igor Sushko has had some very good insights on the war in the past. This is another one of them where his sources in Russia are providing additional information. The thing is, again, I hate not being able to fully vet this type of information. And since this is basically the only source I have on it, I want you to take it with a grain of salt But the overall situation is Shoigu, the former head of the Ministry of Defense, had diverted potentially over $100 million in military equipment and munitions intended for the front line and sold it off to foreign buyers via STG Logistics, a company he co-owns with Gennady Timchenko, another person that, as I recall, is under investigation and potentially arrested. Now, this is where it gets into serious speculation. And I want to just, again, emphasize this is speculation from the information that he is saying here, and I cannot confirm it. Shoigu would order his electronic warfare units to jam all communications of their frontline units that were recipients of the equipment on paper. The equipment that was sold off abroad would then be documented as destroyed when those units got annihilated while blind. So, I'll just pick some numbers here. Say you say, I've got 100 AK-74s. I'm shipping them to that unit on the front lines. Theoretically, that's what the paper says. Then you tell everybody you're going to say, okay, you guys are going to be attacking next. All right, just as they're attacking, jam the communications. Now they can't call for help. Now nobody knows if they're going to live or die. And then when the Ukrainians eliminate the evidence, Shoigu pencil whips it out and says, okay, all that equipment that I just sold to a shady party over there in Mexico or South America or a drug cartel or a shady dictator, all that was destroyed by Ukraine when they killed our guys. Again, I cannot prove this, but if it's true, that is evil. That is seriously evil. And the worst part is, I can't say that I think they didn't do it. I'm tempted to think they did. So, generally speaking, Shusko's source has been pretty good. Again, I try and give you as much information and point out the concerns I have with that as well. But want you to know that there's some crazy things that are going on, and not all of it's pretty. I mean, none of it's pretty, but some of it's scary. Let's move over to the international front for just a little bit here. The Speaker of the Georgian Parliament, Shalvi Pupashvili, ooh, man, apologies, signed the controversial Foreign Agents Bill into law. This is the one that was vetoed by the president, and they just overrode the veto and signed it into law. It will now take partial effect later, well, probably earlier today at this point in time after it's published. That law was basically just a pressure tactic from the Russians. Not going to do them any good. The UK military chief is confident that Ukraine will win the war, but the allies must maintain their support. Admiral Antony Radakin is hugely confident that Ukraine will eventually win the full-scale war despite Russia's recent tactical advances, according to him in an interview with Sky News. I can see that perspective, and I think as long as the support continues and it gets better, that's a key point there. As long as that support gets better and more timely and less restrictive, Ukraine is likely to win, in my opinion. If they don't give that support and don't keep it timely and don't keep the restrictions off, all bets are off. So over in Belarus, how about you're a boss of a company here and you just are ordered to get your guys together, or in this case, ladies, and sing songs praising the dictator Lukashenko. That's right, you could be dismissed or imprisoned if you don't get your troops, staff together and do a nice little show parade here in military cadence, singing the praises of your leader. Could you imagine if they did that to somebody, say, elementary school in the United States, or a manufacturing plant in Michigan? rounded up the employees, made them march around singing songs praising the president. Oh, not good. Now, something interesting has been happening with Serbia's exports. As their exports to Russia fell off, shockingly, their exports to Kyrgyzstan suddenly skyrocketed by, strangely enough, something that was really close to the numbers they were exporting to Russia. I wonder what might be happening there. But Serbia has been pro-Russian satellite for some time in the Balkans, and they're making the case, at least other people outside of Serbia are making the case that no, this means that Serbia's candidacy for the EU membership should be revoked. And if they're going to be anti-Western in their actions, they can be anti-Western in their relationships with Russia, and we can start, sanctioning them as well. Just saying. It's crazy. Luciano Lago says, history has taught us that Stalin's Russia has already done some really shady stuff. And we know who loves Stalin right now. Yeah. Okay, so you remember at the start of the war, the Russians there were all these bioweapons labs in Ukraine that were being stood up by the Americans and all this kind of stuff. Well, all of a sudden they're saying in Kazakhstan, there's Americans setting up bioweapons labs, and they're meant to specifically target Russians and Asian ethnicities. It's the exact same story. Kazakhstan's been a big supporter of Russia for many, many, many years. And now they're seeing what Russia's doing. They started to kind of maybe look at the West, and they're like, oh yeah, that means they're doing bioweapons labs. That's it. Funny, that's exactly what they said before they marched into Ukraine. And now somebody's going to say, oh, but there was that congressional testimony where they mentioned biolabs. You mean bio-research labs like the ones that are looking for infectious diseases and trying to stop, COVID and other plagues and other nasty little bugs like that? That's what they're talking about when they say biolabs. There's no weapons involved. Just don't let Fauci know that. But we may see some action on Russia's side toward Kazakhstan soon, because they're already preparing the ground. Ukrainians in Poland have really managed to integrate into Poland, becoming neighbors, not just guests. In fact, it seems that their long interconnected history between the two nations has meant that those Ukrainian refugees have managed to integrate quite well into Polish society. That's wonderful news. From Jason J. Smart, journalist with the Kyiv Post, the value of Brent crude oil is going down, now hitting about $78 a barrel. And the farther down it goes, the farther down the Russian economy goes. Just pointing it out. Then there's this one, also from the Kyiv Post. Ukrainian special forces and Syrian rebels decimate Russian mercenaries in Syria. Now, my first gut reaction whenever I see these types of stories is, really? That doesn't seem like it makes sense. But the key here is that Ukraine is engaging Russia on every available front. By stopping Russia from making progress in Syria, they are therefore causing Russia to invest more and send more troops and equipment to Syria, or to give up on Syria. So while I sit there and I go, oh, okay, well, maybe, I see the point. Ukraine is engaging Russia on every available domain they can. Information technology, military, in Ukraine, in Russia, and in anywhere the Russians are causing trouble. All in hopes of, stretching Russia's resources even farther. A couple of Russians attacked Ukrainian Czech volunteers in the center of Prague who were raising money for Ukrainians that were affected by the Ukraine war. The Russian woman knocked out a Ukrainian's phone and bashed it down, and they were beating the volunteers with their feet and hands. They ran away. However, a later article I noted said that they had been captured, tried to jump onto a train to Moscow. So that tells you really what their motivation is. I'll be interested to see what they find out in those interrogations, if we can find out. Estonia knows that Ukraine is struggling in the power department, so they're tearing down one of their power units and sending it over to Ukraine. This is enough to provide power for 150,000 Ukrainians. Not a little bit more than a drop in the bucket, but it's something, and it's definitely helpful to keep the Ukrainian power systems up. Now, this one's been kind of a will they, won't they thing from Germany. Earlier today, Bundeswehr General Christian Freuding indicated that Ukrainian forces may be able to target Russian aircraft over Russia with the German-supplied Patriot SAM systems. That would be a pretty big change for Germany, but they've been coming this way, especially after Macron held up a map in front of their faces and said, this is where the Russians are, that they're attacking Ukraine. This is where Ukrainians need to hit them if they want to stop them. And this former Royal Navy Westland Sea King is on a delivery flight to Ukraine with Ukrainian color. It's at Antwerp International Airport in Belgium, on its way to be delivered. Quite the beautiful helicopter. France is currently delivering 50 AASM extended range guide bombs to Ukraine every month, per the CEO. They have spent a lot of money to expand their production capacity, and my understanding is they can actually produce 90 of these per month. They're just waiting on the go-ahead from France to do so. So turn on the taps, get it going. Let's get some more missiles made, or bombs in this case. Hackers of the Russian Federation tried to attack the critical infrastructure of Poland. This was a whole bunch of stuff that happened on Sunday and on the night of Monday, June 3rd. This is just part of the information warfare domain. Russia's at war with the West, not just with Ukraine, but at war with the West. And the truth is that it's time we start figuring it out and dealing with it. So, interesting. Moving on to the front lines for a little bit here. We've got one little inky-dinky change right here around Karlivka. Now, just to get some context here, we're outside of Avdiivka area here on the west side, on the east of Ukraine, of course. And as we get in here and we get zoomed in, let's show you what the change is here. A little bit of basically just the south side of this water feature here. Not a big change, and overall, that's been the situation in the changes over the last while. Small ones. Now, Russia still is making bites at territory on the east side, but not big ones. Still, how to eat an elephant? One bite at a time. In the Kharkiv region, Russian sources report that their offensive has bogged down, and Ukrainian forces are starting to counterattack. They expect a bigger push soon, with the Ukrainians reportedly retaking some areas inside of Vovchansk. You can kind of see this little couple of blue dots right here. It means that the Ukrainians are managing to stay across the river on the north side and continue to work that area. An attack towards Stolitsia was repelled outright, with no advance by Russian forces. The Russian propagandists are also confirming that they have stopped and they are converting into active defense. Here's where that ability to launch attacks into Russia is going to pay off in spades. You see, if Ukraine can destroy the supply lines before they get into Ukraine, it means the Russian troops in Kharkiv that are relying on the supply lines can't stay in Ukraine. That's how they're going to kick them out. Kind of the same thing that the Ukrainians did when they took over Kherson, kicking the Russians across the Dnieper River. They destroyed the Russian ability to resupply their troops on the north side of the Dnieper River, and that made the Russians have to pull back and pull out. That's what they're working on there. Geolocated footage has confirmed that Ukrainian forces have recaptured significant parts of eastern Volchansk. You can see here it's an even larger section right here, north of the Volcha River, and are further advancing to the northeastern part. Heavy fighting reported in the area highlighted in green, which, if you look carefully, you'll realize most of the center part of Volchansk is effectively recovered. The Russians are on suburbs and outskirts here. There's a little section right here where they got a little bit of a foothold in perhaps downtown Volchansk from the looks of things here. But look at the change just having the Western weapons coming in was really made. A Russian soldier surrendered to Ukrainian troops in the northeastern part of Volchansk. This is again where Ukrainian forces are advancing and pushing the forces back. I already mentioned this bit about the area near Karlivka when we're talking with the deep state map right at the start. The battle for Volchansk continues, and it feels like this is only the beginning, according to Kriegsforscher. It's totally clear that Russian armed forces will use at this direction more reserves and will try to do what they have written here a couple weeks ago. They will try to cut the logistics near Kupiansk. They've started in this direction. They've started the advance in this direction, mainly with the 138th Brigade and some assault companies from different regiments. Right now, they deployed at least one battalion of 25 Mechanized Brigade and one air assault battalion of 83 VDV. And so they're trying to cut off the resupply to Kupiansk, which has been a thorn in Russia's side, just a little bit to the east of Kharkiv. Let's kind of take a look at that here. Back out. Kupiansk is down here. It's about, let's get the measure. Boink. Boop. And boop. It's only about 80 kilometers, so about 50 miles between Kupiansk and Volchansk. But right now, with the way things are going for the Russians, it might as well be an eternity away. Still, the goal is to cut off the supply lines to Kupiansk, which has been a thorn in Russia's side, holding out and holding steady. So, interesting. Something to keep an eye on. Good news, the Ukrainians have regained control of Lipsy. That is, get over here. Lipsy, where is Lipsy? I have lost Lipsy. Thought it was right here in Leibok. Let's find out. Lipsy. Yeah, there we go. Lipsy here. Of course, this whole area is kind of a open area here, but still, the Ukrainians have managed to get them pushed back a little bit in this area. All to the good. Then we got some not so good news. This is Chasiv Yar. You can see that the overall situation is pretty rough there. This is another flattened city, destroyed city like Bakhmut at this point in time. That's going to require a whole lot of blood, sweat, and tears to rebuild in the future, if they ever can. Now, we talked about a couple of times the use of Western weapons across the border in Kharkiv, from Kharkiv and the Russian area there. This is the destruction of an S-400 launcher system. This looks like this is in the territory of Belgorod. This happened on June 1st and 2nd. It was destroyed by a HIMARS missile. This is probably one of the first, in fact, it may be the first, but just one of the first, of the military strikes on Russian Federation with American weapons. This allows them to take out these launchers. Many of them have been converted to actually do ground attack, surface-to-surface missiles. So this may have been lobbing S-300 or S-400 missiles into Ukraine as intending to attack ground targets. This is from Wargonzo, the typical Russian resource. Mostly, this is kind of just confirming the things we've already talked about, so there's no big news here. Zaporizhia front near Robotina and Verbova, no particular offensive activity. They're saying not a lot of fighting, and they're saying that this front may have died down. Donetsk, they're working on Krasnodarivka and expanding their zone of control there. They're calling for things I think have happened over the last couple of days that have been reported previously, but they do report an advance in the direction of Sokol, where things are getting pretty hot right now. Chasiv Yar, things haven't really changed anything. They're still trying to capture the heights that are preventing them from advancing. And Kharkiv, the Ukrainian armed forces are actively counterattacking, pulling up reserves in this direction. Heavy fighting also continues in the Lipsy area. This is their most recent update as well. So even the Russians are seeing what we're talking about right here. A Russian supply base in the industrial district of Shebekino-Belgorod region was wiped out this morning. Now, this is the one that the Russians claimed was a civilian market, but you can see missile parts right here, and various other military hardware in the debris. This is not a civilian location, and the debris doesn't match with it being a civilian location. The Ukrainians are making the maximum effort to destroy Russian supply depots, supply chains in Belgorod in order to stop them from ever getting into Ukraine. This is that same warehouse, as I understand. This is less than 15 kilometers from the front line in Kharkiv Oblast. Think about that for just a moment there. 15 kilometers. And until now, the Ukrainians weren't able to destroy this vital supply depot that the Russians have been using. This is the a factory in Soledar in occupied Donetsk Oblast. This factory was being used to repair tanks and equipment. So the Ukrainians used a HIMARS and destroyed the whole factory. You can kind of see the situation here. And to give you a clue as to how much the HIMARS are making a big difference here, these are the empty launching tubes from the HIMARS Gimlers, the shorter range precision missiles. This is, let me see, I think I've got a count there, 324 Gimlers missile cartridges just in this photo. The Ukrainians weren't kidding when they said they were in pleasant shock at how many missiles they finally received. Quite the impressive amount of combat had taking place with the HIMARS and the Gimler's missiles therefrom. Look at, again, this is something that has been retired from U.S. service. It's no longer in active production or use. We just need to hand them over for disposal by the Ukrainians. And they're making the most of them. Absolutely the most. Another Gimel, this is the S-400 system I already mentioned. This is where I got the information that it was potentially repurposed for ground strikes. And overall, that's kind of the front lines. You can see that things are kind of looking up over in Kharkiv, where the Ukrainians have managed to seize some initiative by judicious and plentiful application of Western weapons to interdict supply lines, destroy relevant Russian locations, Russian military outposts, military facilities. This is what's making the real difference. Getting it before it can get into Ukraine, it makes all the difference in the world. And that's it for that. Let's go ahead and jump into a couple of extras right here. And now's a good time. If you've got a question or a comment, pop it in there. We can talk about it right before we end off. I've got about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items here. So just an interesting item here. The Chinese Chang'e 6 probe landed on the far side of the moon. It has a drill and a robotic arm, and it will collect soil samples on the moon after landing. And this will be the first country in the world, if they successfully do so, to return samples from the far side of the moon. I think there was a record that was about that, or a song. This kind of hit me in the feels a little bit. Let me get this a little larger for you. This is a video that the Ukrainians released for International Children's Day, reminding the Ukrainians to not ignore the alarm signals. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play here, get my audio unmuted because I think it's worth the watch.
Доню, Все готово. Ходімо.
З днем народження, з днем народження, з днем народження, доця, з днем народження.
Загадуй бажання.
Бажаю, щоб усі були у безпеці. Збережи життя, іди в укриття.
Доню,
Doesn't that just hit you in the feels there? I mean, I'm safe and comfortable in my home. I don't have to worry about missiles coming in. I don't have to worry about an air raid siren going off or anything more than a tornado that might be tearing through somewhere nearby. And even then, I know they're coming. I can see the weather. I can watch the weather forecast. I can know they're coming. Yeah, it hits you in the feels. I realize this is just a produced video to just remind Ukrainians that every warning needs to be taken seriously. They need to get into their shelters. But it's just a reminder that their everyday lives are being rebuilt around the idea of being under constant threat. And then there's this little thing from Indigo. And I think you can see this, but I'll just kind of talk about it for a moment. Look at this. Texas Oblast vet. Free, then Russian character lover. Freedom lover. Ukraine bad. Lots of views and shares and things like that. Elon Musk says, wow. And somebody responds, go Russia. And yet, this is just kind of just what they do. This is their propaganda operation effectively on Twitter/X.com. And often the Ukraine bad video turns out to be the Russian bad video. Or not related. Or just totally mischaracterized. The example I have most recently is that there was one man who had been summoned for military service. He was already in uniform and everything, and he was fighting against his superiors. And a bunch of people caught it on their cell phones, and that went around like, oh, look, they're taking people right off the streets and forcing them to fight. No, they're dealing with a mobilization. They're dealing with a soldier. You get in the uniform, you make that commitment. And it doesn't matter what you say after that point, you've made that commitment. Now, maybe you can get some conscientious objector thing going on, but in the end, you're in the uniform. It's time to serve. Then there's this just kind of humorous headline here. China may be using the sea to hide its submarines. I knew it. They're putting the submarines underwater. Oh, my heavens. Just makes you laugh. In fact, if you didn't laugh, you probably wouldn't be able to just survive here. I understand what your problem is. You are too serious. An intelligent face is not yet a sign of intelligence, gentlemen. All stupid things on earth are done with this exact facial expression. Smile, gentlemen. Smile. That comes from that same Munchausen. And I just thought the dogs are super, super cute. And finally, I have one last video for you. Yeah, Jerry and Lucille. Exactly. This one, I'll talk about it afterward. It's 2.5 minutes. And let's see, I don't think there's any significant problems with the audio. So I'm going to go ahead and fire it up.
Степан, іди скорше сюди. Миру 22. Все, я розумію, я зрозумів. що після такого стресу ти просто дуже радий мене бачити. Так, ти подивися, який радий він бачити. Бери на руки його.
Тільки заради цієї одної собачки ми вже не дарма приїхав.
Так, а де мамка його?
О, гавкає.
Ну, покажи тут маленький.
Таке зайчиня. Нісінь.
Ну, схоженько. З трудом загнали в гараж. Спокійно. Спокійно. Тут тільки без різких рухів. Все?
Так, що робимо?
Виходимо.
Давай
що
я
робимо?
тут. Заявка на 115 номер. Зараз йду. Перевірю двір. І будинок.
Ми її ловили. Телькою заподтягували, глянь. Загладить дається.
Це мама
Так, це мама.
I realized that was a lot of subtitles to read there in a hurry, but the long story short is that these are crews going into the Kharkiv area, to Vovchansk. They are animal rescue Kharkiv. They're being informed on where animals are. They're trying to get them, rescue them, and take them out. These animals are frightened and scared because of all the explosions that that they're going through, all the chaos around them, the houses that are destroyed. And it takes time for these volunteers to capture them, calm them, and bring them away from the danger. I'm gonna let that speak for itself. These are people who are truly motivated by love. And that's everything for today. Thank you very much for joining me. I do appreciate you being here. Glad to have you here with me, as always. If you have any questions or comments, absolutely pop them in. I'll see if I can find some answers for you. Who knows? I might find them, might not. But I want you to know how much I appreciate you. You're all part of making this an amazing experience, learning about what's going on in the war in Ukraine, and often things that are going on around the world. And I appreciate every single one of you. And on that note, hit me with that thumbs up if you enjoyed today's video. You have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next video.